All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Thomas and I do educational stuff here. We are wrapping up our uh, reading of the final book of Dewey B. Larson called Beyond Space and Time. And this book goes into metaphysics, um, religion, psychology, philosophy, which was a departure from his earlier books, which were all on um, the hard sciences. And Larson is the author of the Reciprocal System of Theory. And this is a theory of everything, meaning that you can take the theory and you can apply it to any subject once you kind of understand how it works, and you have to use a good amount of induction and deductive reasoning to kind of figure out how it all fits together. It's not easy, but the theory itself is something he came up with in the 20th century. Wrote down his first initial postulates, two initial postulates in the 1950s. And the basic idea is that we live in a universe of motion. The universe is not made out of matter, it's not made out of energy, but it is made out of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are really non-existent except as how they come together in motion. Their relationship is motion. And so you need both of them to get motion, and they are related in like a fraction. And they are reciprocally related, meaning that you invert one to get the other. And so, you have time over space, or you could have space over time, or you could have time, as we'll see, time to the first power over space to the second power, time to the second power over space to the first power. That is what you call impulse, and so on. Now, time and space both being multidimensional, because we can recognize space as being three or more dimensions. And by the reciprocal postulate, whatever qualities adhere to one of the space and time also adhere to the other. So time is also multidimensional in that same way. And Larson calls that coordinate space and coordinate time. But also time we recognize to be flowing or progressing. It's always getting later and later. And therefore, too, space also has that quality. The flow of space was recognized by the Hubble telescope as the recession of the distant galaxies. Space is always getting farther and farther away. Larson calls this clock time and clock space. And this is really like a scalar motion. It's a motion that has a magnitude but no particular direction. There's no, you can envision it as a bunch of dots that you put on a balloon with a magic marker. You blow up that balloon and all of the dots are moving away from each other. That is an outward scalar motion. The only direction it has is out or in, depending on whether you're blowing up the balloon or sucking in the balloon. Space and time are also only in discrete units, meaning that they come in little chunks, 1 unit at a time. And 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. Now, in Einstein's universe, the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe, but for Larson, the speed of light is the midpoint or the null point or even the origin of the universe, meaning that half of the universe is actually moving faster than the speed of light. Larson calls this the cosmic sector, or sector 2, and half of the universe is moving slower than the speed of light. That's the half that we're familiar with, that Larson calls sector 1, or the material sector. The material sector aggregates, bonds with each other, atoms bond with each other until they get to their most complicated level, which is the DNA molecule containing a couple of billion of atoms. And at that level, the DNA molecule becomes eligible to be taken over or controlled by an entity from sector 2, a cosmic entity that when you put them both together, Larson calls that the life unit. Life is a combination of a material and cosmic unit in the right configuration, in the right proportions. And this life unit starts out as a single-celled organism, and it grows and evolves and develops over time up to its most complex level, which is, for Larson, the intelligent human being or humanoid. And at that level, the intelligent human being becomes eligible to be controlled overall by an entity from sector 3. And this sector 3, which other people would call God or the gods or the goddesses or the spirit world or the religious, is pointing at this actual speed of light, the 1/1 relationship, the one. But Larson calls it sector 3 and says that sector 3 is always good, and it communicates with human beings in various ways through various channels such as ESP and intuition and revelation and insight. And those communications are always correct. But our ability as basically spiritual single-celled organisms is limited in being able to decode these messages. Decoding messages from sector 3, depending on the complexity, requires a great deal of preparation and concentration and dedication. And at this point in time in our spiritual evolution, we're not quite there yet, but we are getting there. And that is what Larson says is really the purpose of this universe, is to elevate us to this spiritual fluency, where we are able to, lock in on those messages that we get from sector 3 and utilize them properly. Now, his final book, Beyond Space and Time, came out posthumously in 1995, as you might guess, is on this metaphysical subject, on sector 3. That is the metaphysical beyond space and time, independent of space and time. This is referring to sector 3. And so we're looking at the last chapter here that's called Human Destiny. And we will back up a little bit, okay, we'll start right here. Here comes quoting Larson. He asserted categorically that it is not the natural body that is resurrected. This is referring to Paul. He asserted categorically that it is not the natural body that is resurrected, but the spiritual body, a body that, as he said, does not bear the image of the earthly. This is essentially the same conclusion that has emerged from our investigation. So Larson is agreeing with the Apostle Paul here. The physical body is a piece of equipment that the human individual must possess in order to take part in life in the physical universe, just as he must possess a boat if he is to take part in marine activities. The point brought out in the last chapter is that the death of the human individual is like the sinking of the boat. It terminates the particular kind of activities for which a special unit of equipment is required. But it does not prevent the individual from being active in some other environment. What we are now considering is the possibility that the deceased human individual may do something equivalent to buying a new boat, so that he may resume the kind of activities that were interrupted by death. Thus, in the light of our new findings, the usual objections that have been raised to the general concept of reincarnation are without merit. On the other hand, there are adequate grounds for rejecting some of the specific beliefs of those who regard the reincarnation process as a reality. The idea that a person will return to a higher or lower station in life, depending on the nature of his conduct during the previous existence, cannot be entertained, as there is nothing to indicate that any one human situation is superior to another from the Sector 3 standpoint. The further extension of this idea to include life as an animal is totally unacceptable, as animals do not participate in Sector 3 existence at all. Another belief widely held in the East that must be rejected is that whatever evil and suffering a person encounters in his earthly life are punishments for his misdeeds in his earlier incarnations. As emphasized, the evils of human life are phenomena of the physical sectors of existence as a whole, and they do not survive death in any form. There is no posthumous punishment. The absence of any valid argument against the reality of reincarnation does not prove that such a process exists. Our next undertaking, therefore, will be to examine the positive evidence in favor of its existence. The strongest argument on the positive side is that reincarnation is the only plausible means thus far envisioned for completing the task that remains unfinished at the death of the human individual. The human lifespan is far too short to enable accomplishing more than a small fraction of what is necessary in order to reach the ultimate goal. And if existence as a whole actually has a logical and rational character that we have concluded we are justifying in attributing to it, there must be some provision for continuing the process of which human life is an unfinished part. Biological evolution is faced with a similar problem. Here, too, no more than a small fraction of the total task can be accomplished within the lifetime of an individual organism. But the biological sector is not concerned with individuals as such. The task of biological evolution is to develop a highly complex type of organism from a simple life form, without regard for the number of individuals taking part in the process or what happens to those individuals. Evolution has therefore been able to compensate for the short individual lifespan by utilizing a long succession of lives of different individuals. This expedient is not available where the objective is development of the individual. Some of the Eastern religions picture the ultimate fate of the human spirit as a reabsorption back into the divine essence from which they contend it originated. This appears to be a reflection of a general attitude toward life that is quite different from the usual Western viewpoint. The Western religions take the stand that individual existence, on the whole, is a desirable thing and should be perpetuated. These Eastern thinkers, on the other hand, regard individual existence in this world as a heavy burden from which release is desired. Whatever the respective merits of the conflicting appraisals of human life may be, our findings indicate that the extinction of individuality, in accordance with these Eastern doctrines, would conflict with the underlying purpose of human existence. The unfinished task must be carried to completion in some other way. If we rule out completion by decree as being inconsistent with the orderly and law-abiding character of existence as we see it in those portions of the whole that are accessible to observation, it follows that there must be a succession of existences of each non-physical individual, either in the observed physical universe or in some other universe of motion, of change. There are also some considerations of equity that have an important bearing on this situation. Some individuals are born into environments in which they have little chance of developing their ethical personalities to more than a minimum degree. Others are similarly limited by a short lifespan, by disease, or by physical infirmities. It does not seem equitable to hold these individuals to the same standards that apply to those who have not been subject to such handicaps. But neither would it be equitable to credit them with an accomplishment when, in fact, nothing has been accomplished. Equitable treatment for all is undoubtedly part of the Sector 3 code. Our intuitive knowledge of elementary ethical principles assures us of this. The far from ideal allocation of human happiness appears to conflict with this principle, but we have found that happiness has no significance from the standpoint of existence in general. Whether one receives more or less of it is therefore immaterial from the long-range viewpoint, and consequently there is no real need for any equalization in an afterlife. Equitable treatment with respect to opportunity for ethical advancement, on the other hand, is vital, and it would seem to be an essential part of the overall program. A series of successive existences is the only adequate solution to this equity problem that has yet been suggested. If there are a considerable number of such existences, the operation of probability will give each individual approximately the same average environment. Okay, now keep in mind that Larson wrote this 30 or more years ago, and there was kind of no distinction at that time between equity and equality. The equality of opportunity or the equality of result, and that it's in the reverse. Equity as being the equality of result, whereas equality being the equality of opportunity. Larson is, I believe, in this paragraph really just talking about equality, but he uses the term equity, which is just a political sleight of hand that the crazy people that run this world have employed over the last handful of years in order to get all kinds of very unfair things passed under their mantle. Okay, now back to Larson. While the idea of reincarnation is anathema to much of the Western world, the new light on this subject has been contributed by this present work, should help to make it more palatable. And again, just remember how Larson talked about earlier in this chapter, how in 553 AD, the writings on reincarnation were expunged from the Bible. Okay, so it used to be part of the Christian Bible, but it is not anymore for the last almost 1,500 years. One of that I think is the Second Council on Constantinople. One of the principal conceptual obstacles has been the strong commitment to the idea of the uniqueness of the individual that is characteristic of Western thinking. The hypothesis that two human beings who have been identified as different individuals may actually have been the same individual living at different times seems to undermine this uniqueness and to be more in harmony with Eastern concepts of collective existence. This objection should, however, be minimized by our findings, which now show that reincarnation does not necessarily or even probably involve successive earthly existences. According to these findings, the new life of the individual may emerge on another of the millions of Earth-like planets in our physical universe that were discussed earlier. Or it may emerge in some entirely different universe, perhaps even of a totally different kind of universe. This concept of successive lives in different and entirely separate places should not be so difficult to accept as a logical possibility, except for a difference in the viewpoint as to the objective to be accomplished. A new stage of existence of this nature is not unlike the purgatory to which a large segment of Western religious thought is already committed. In fact, some of the views of existence as a whole that have previously been formulated are remarkably similar to the conclusions of this work. For instance, G.R.S. Mead tells us that some people regard, quote, the present life as a stage leading to ever superior states of existence, either on other planets or in other conditions of life higher than are possible on this earth, end quote. Back to Larson, just where the improvement of ethical conduct in earthly society, together with corresponding advances in collateral areas, fits into the general picture is not definitely indicated, but it would be logical to conclude that the reincarnation process, if it exists, involves some kind of a mechanism whereby individuals are assigned to successively more advanced environments as their individual personalities advance toward the ultimate goal. This is what is implied in the statement just quoted. On the assumption that the ethical improvement that is taking place on Earth is a reflection of a general trend that is applicable to all life-supporting planets, it is possible that the succession of existences takes place on successively older and more advanced planets in the known physical universe. There will always be a range of planets of ages from very young to very old, as no planet is permanent and new ones are continually being formed. Even if the central star of a planetary system maintains the precarious balance between inflow and outflow of energy that is essential to continuation of biological life on its attendant planet, the existence of the galaxy of which that central star is a part is limited to a finite period of time. Thus, the appropriate conditions for a succession of existences within the observed physical universe are always present. Okay, now a lot of that Larson gets into in his books on astronomy, which I have to say are based on various assumptions that the prevailing views of astronomy are generally correct. Okay, that's about it for today. We'll resume tomorrow and finish this book up.